Hi, I'm Becky. I'm the founder of the Sayas to Art program brought to you by Brush of Genius. And we have some great programs on our brushofgenius.com site, some video instruction to help you grow into a great artist. Everyone has an artist within them, even you. Today, I want to show you some techniques that I use in my watercolors, which makes them really exciting and fun and kind of shakes them up a little bit. So here are some of the techniques that I want to talk about today. And keep in mind, there's a vast number of techniques you can use with your watercolor paintings. These are just a few simple, fun ones that are easy to implement. So the first one is using salt. If you put salt on your fresh paint, it actually lifts the paint and creates little white spots that are kind of fuzzy and cool. So salt's a great way to add light to your painting. Another thing we're going to learn today is scraping. This is a palette scraper, and if you scrape your paints, it adds a cool dimension and saves your whites. Another thing we're going to learn about is splattering. We're going to dip a paintbrush in paint and splatter it all over the painting, and that's great for creating illusions of dirt or texture or sand. It creates all these little dots on your painting. We're also going to talk about using a fan brush and the things you can do to add character to your painting with a fan brush. And finally, this is a razor blade. We're going to learn how to scrape out your whites if you haven't saved enough. So let's take a look at all these techniques. Okay, so let's look at a few techniques that we can play around with today. First of all, I want to get something on my paper. So I have some cobalt green there. I'm using a little cobalt blue. I'm using some cadmium yellow pale to get some yellow. I'm using some quinacridone rust, which is a really, really cool, vibrant, intense color. I love that color. And then I'm using some cerulean blue, which, as we talked about in other videos, has a warmer color than the cobalt blue. And I'd like to start by, maybe making some grasses. Okay, so let's just kind of, oops, that turned out really brown. Let's just kind of take some green here, add plenty of water, and start making some grasses, right? Like this. And now I'm going to take my fan brush, which is just a fan, and I'm going to dip it into some other colors and use my water. And I'm going to drop in some colors and play around with my fan brush like this. Notice I'm just pushing down. I'm not going like this with the fan brush. That would result in that kind of stroke. Instead, I'm taking the fan brush and I'm just kind of dotting some colors into my brush. Okay, just like that. And I'm maybe using a little bit of the fan stroke for the base of the grasses, but a huge component of the way I'm using this is just to press paint into the grasses. All right, now what I'm going to do, now that I have this base, I'm going to take some salt and see what it does. So I'm taking some salt. And we can come back to this, but look at how it affects the paint. Look at how the salt kind of lifts the paint with each speck of salt. And I think that's really cool. Already look at these grasses and look at how varied they are. Now I'm going to try something else. I'm going to take a palette scraper, and you have to wait until the paint is dry enough. It can't be really, really super wet for this to work, but when it's dry enough, and the only way to tell is to try it, you can scrape out some whites, just like I'm doing now. So maybe I want to scrape it here and there to add some more texture to my grasses. Maybe I even want to take some grasses up with the palette scraper. And I like what it's doing, but it's not really creating whites. because the paint is still too wet, but that's okay. I'm still going to use it and work with it until the paint gets a little drier. So you can see how this is adding texture and dimension to my grasses. Finally, when the paint is dry, I'm going to come in and use a razor blade and lift some grasses, lift the paint off to create some white grasses, and that'll be really cool because that will add light to my painting. But before it dries, or after it dries, I'm going to come in and do some splattering. And with splattering, I just take a flat brush, and it has to be nice and firm. I take this flat brush, I put a tiny bit of water on, but not too much, and I dip it into paint, so it's pretty dry, and then I take my finger and I literally splatter some paint onto the painting. It's being kind of stubborn right now, it's not working. There we go. Now it's starting to splatter. Let's keep on trying that. You might need to play around with the water and how much water you use. There we go. Now it's really splattering. And look at what it's doing there. It's adding some kind of cool, I don't know, dirt-like dimension to this. In a second, when this dries, I will razor blade and scrape out some whites. Okay, so now our painting of grasses is dry, and I'm going to just scrape off the salt so you can see what effect that has on the painting. Leaves a lot of little textured spots, as you can see. You have to kind of look closely. But overall, the salt lifted some paint here and there and left some really cool spots. Now what we're going to do is take a little razor blade, and be really careful when you do this, because obviously you could accidentally cut yourself, and so you have to be very, very careful. But if you want to lift some lights from a painting that has maybe lost some whites, you can always scrape some whites off by using a little razor blade. And look at how much light this adds to our grasses. Again, you have to be very careful, and don't create a hole in the painting, but usually if you get heavy enough paper, like 300-pound paper or even 140-pound paper, you're able to scrape off some paint with a razor blade. And that's a way to infuse light back into a painting that doesn't have enough whites. So there you go. There are our fun little watercolor techniques, and there's a lot more, but these are just some good ones to try out. Hey, so I hope you like these techniques that we learned today, the salt and the scraping, the razor blade if you haven't saved your whites. There's all sorts of techniques in art, and these are just some of them, but I hope that they help you and that you have fun with them and that they add character and dimension to your painting. So if you liked this video, we'd love it if you hit like, and maybe watch the next video. You'll learn something. Anyway, be sure to always say yes to art, because art is such an important part of life, and you too can become an incredible artist.